This happened about 3 years back, around mid-October. At the time, I was working as a field technician for a biomedical company based just outside of Leeds. It meant a lot of driving. Most days were standard, but once or twice a month, I'd have to do a late-night run down to a laboratory near Nottingham to drop off calibrated samples. It was a tedious, boring drive down the M1 motorway, usually starting around 11 at night when the roads were completely empty. If you've ever driven the M1 past midnight, you know what it's like. It's just miles and miles of endless black asphalt, cat's eyes reflecting on the tarmac, and the occasional overhead motorway sign glowing green in your headlights. There's no scenery, just the hum of the tires and the dim light of your dashboard. It was a Tuesday night, freezing cold, and a miserable fine drizzle was hitting the windscreen. I'd finished the drop-off early, around 1 a.m., and I was heading back north. I was exhausted, just wanting to get home to my own bed. The motorway was practically deserted. Every few miles I might pass a lone articulated lorry sitting in the left lane, but otherwise I had the road to myself. I was cruising in the middle lane doing a steady 70 when I noticed a car in my rearview mirror. It was a good distance back, maybe half a mile, but it was catching up fast. It looked like an old dark-colored Vauxhall Astra, dull silver or dark grey, hard to tell in the dark. It didn't have its full beams on, just its standard headlights, but they were slightly misaligned. The left light was angled a bit higher than the right, casting an awkward, crooked pattern on the road. I didn't think much of it. People speed on the motorway all the time at night. I expected it to just pull into the right lane, overtake me, and disappear into the darkness ahead. Instead, the car pulled up right behind me. It didn't tailgate me aggressively, but it stayed exactly one car length behind my back bumper, sitting squarely in the middle lane. I looked in my rearview mirror, but because of the misaligned headlights, the glare was hitting my eyes perfectly, forcing me to flip the little tab on the mirror to dim the reflection. "Move over then, idiot," I muttered to myself, assuming it was just a driver who didn't understand motorway etiquette. I checked my blind spot, flicked my indicator, and moved over into the left lane to let him pass. But the Astra didn't stay in the middle lane. The second my car crossed the white lines, it followed me. It pulled into the left lane and settled right back onto my bumper. Now I was annoyed. I tapped my brakes slightly, not a full slam, just enough to flash my brake lights and tell him to back off. The Astra didn't slow down. It stayed at the exact same distance. I decided to just speed up, get away from him, and move back into the middle lane. I pressed the accelerator, pushing my car up to 80. The Astra matched my speed instantly. I pulled back into the middle lane. The Astra pulled into the middle lane right behind me. My stomach did a slight flip. It wasn't panic yet, just that sudden, uncomfortable prickle of heat you get in your chest when you realize something normal has just turned strange. I dropped my speed. I let the car coast down to 60, then 55, waiting to see what he would do. Surely if someone is driving that fast, they don't want to crawl along at 55 miles an hour behind a tech van. The Astra slowed down too. It remained locked onto my rear bumper. Through the dimmed rearview mirror, I tried to make out who was inside. With the glare of his own headlights bouncing off my rear window, it was almost impossible. But during a brief second when we passed under a massive overhead motorway light, I caught a glimpse of the front seats. There were 4 people inside that car. They were sitting completely still. No one was turning their head to talk. No one was shifting in their seat. Usually when a car full of lads is messing around or road raging, you see a lot of movement, gesticulating, laughing, leaning forward. These 4 were perfectly straight, staring directly ahead through the windscreen, directly at the back of my head. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I didn't want to play whatever game this was anymore. Up ahead, about 2 miles out, the green sign for a services station appeared. The Woodall Services. I knew the layout well. It had a 24-hour petrol station and a large, well-lit parking area. I figured if I pulled off the motorway, they'd either keep driving north or follow me into a highly visible CCTV monitored area where they couldn't do anything. I kept my indicator off until the very last second. As the slip road opened up for the services, I swerved sharply left, cutting across the hatch markings on the tarmac, and hit the slip road at speed. I checked my side mirror, fully expecting to see the Astra continuing straight down the M1. It didn't. It had pulled the exact same maneuver. It didn't skid or swerve aggressively. It just smoothly cut across the lane markings, matching my sudden turn perfectly, and followed me down the dark slip road towards the services. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. I accelerated down the winding lane that led toward the petrol station. As I rounded the corner into the services, my heart sank. The main amenities building was completely dark, closed for renovations, and the large lorry park was empty except for 2 sleeping rigs at the far end. The petrol station itself was open, but the lights under the massive canopy felt dim against the surrounding woods. There wasn't a single soul outside. Even the glass kiosk looked empty, the cashier probably sitting in the back room. I didn't stop at the pumps. I drove past them, intending to circle back around to the slip road and get back onto the motorway. But as I pulled into the narrow lane that bypasses the petrol station, the Astra didn't follow behind me this time. It accelerated, engine roaring, and pulled up right alongside my driver's side door, effectively boxing me in against the high concrete curb on my left. We were moving at about 20 miles an hour side by side in the empty orange-lit service area. I couldn't help it. I turned my head and looked directly through my side window. The Astra's passenger window was already rolled down. The car was lower than my van, so I had to look slightly downward. There were 4 men inside. They were all wearing ordinary dark casual clothes, hoodies and jackets, but it was their faces that made my breath catch in my throat. They weren't looking at the road. All 4 of them, the driver, the front passenger, and the 2 men in the back seat, had their heads turned completely toward me, and they were smiling. It wasn't a malicious grin or an angry smirk. It was a wide, vacant, completely blank stretch of the mouth, the kind of smile someone gives when they are pretending to be happy for a photo. Their eyes were wide open, completely unblinking, reflecting the orange sodium lights of the petrol station. The driver was steering the car seamlessly, keeping it perfectly parallel to mine, without ever taking his eyes off my face. No one shouted, no one waved a weapon. They just stared at me through the open window with those identical frozen smiles, their faces just 3 feet away from mine. A wave of pure, primitive terror hit me. It didn't feel human. The absolute coordination of it, the lack of any normal road rage or emotion. It felt like a group of people executing a rehearsed clinical routine. I slammed my foot on the brake. My van screeched to a halt, the tires smoking slightly on the wet concrete. The Astra, caught off guard by the sudden stop, shot forward about 20 yards before the driver managed to brake. I didn't wait. I threw the van into reverse, the gearbox grinding horribly, and backed up 20 yards into the open space of the petrol pump canopy. I shifted back into first gear, yanked the wheel to the right and floored it, tearing across the tarmac towards the exit slip road that led back to the M1. I didn't look back until I was merging back onto the empty motorway. When I finally checked my rearview mirror, The slip road behind me was completely dark. The crooked, misaligned headlights were gone. They hadn't followed me back out. I drove the remaining 40 miles back to Leeds at 90 miles an hour, my eyes glued to the mirrors, every single car headlight behind me making my chest tighten so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't even park in my usual spot outside my flat. I left the van directly under a street lamp 3 doors down and sprinted to my front door. I handed in my notice at that company the following Monday. I told them the night travel was getting too much for me, and I took a local warehouse job instead. It pays less, but I don't care. I don't drive at night anymore. If I'm out and it starts getting dark, I go home. But every now and then, if I'm on a dual carriageway and a car pulls into the lane behind me, I look at the mirrors. I think about those 4 men sitting perfectly still in the dark. I think about what would have happened if I'd run out of petrol under that canopy, or if my van had stalled when I hit the brakes. I think about those wide, unblinking eyes, and I wonder if they're still out there, driving the middle lane, just looking for someone else to follow home.